My name is Randall Mackey. I'm an illustrator, concept artist, and art director, and I have almost a decade of experience in the game industry. And currently I'm the manager of art and design education at ArtStation. I have had the privilege to work for some of the most awesome clients in the industry, including Epic Games, Riot, EA Maxis, and Hi-Res Studios, among others. So despite my natural inclination to design spaceships and faraway worlds or orcas that hunt whales and mermaids, one of the primary ways I've made a living in the past few years as a freelancer has been by painting icons. I probably painted, hundreds of icons, maybe close to 600 if I'm guessing, for League of Legends, Smite, and Paladins, as well as a few small mobile projects. I actually super love painting icons. They're really engaging. Each one is a small puzzle and a challenge with its own specific constraints, and it ends up being a super tiny illustration. And I end up taking a lot of pride in each one. So that's why we're here. We're here to talk about icons, and I'm going to demo over a 2-part course, some techniques and tips and thoughts, some things to keep in mind when painting icons for games. So in this first part, we're going to take a basic look at how to lay out some icons, how to sketch them, talking about values and contrast, and then we're going to do a small demo with a simple spell effect icon. In the second part, we're going to take a deeper look at some specific icons that I've painted, some specific hero kits, as well as addressing esports considerations and gameplay considerations a little more in depth. And then we're going to go into a little more complex demo with an item, most likely a boot or something like that. All right, let's jump in here and start making some quick little value sketch icons. So the first thing we're going to demonstrate is that you want super high contrast in your values. This first one isn't very descriptive. It's not anything in particular, but it's just showing that you want a decent separation and value range for maximum readability. One of the things you want to remember with icons is that they're going to appear in game very small. People are going to be playing on laptops, mobile devices often. They're going to be viewing it in esports, which is something we'll get into later. So you want to have maximum contrast at a super, super small scale. So I'm just kind of demonstrating how you can call out shapes and forms in this first one. The second one here, I'm going to jump in and do a quick little demo of what you would do with like a weapon or a sword. So this would be like maybe one of your items. This one probably isn't really meant to be like an ability, but more an item that you would acquire in game. So what you're seeing me do here is that I'm going opposite. So I've created a diagonal gradient that's light to dark. And this is what you kind of, in general, my rule is with weapons, is that you want the pointy end to be the highlight. You want it to be the super brightest, highest contrast, most highlighty piece of the icon. And then the handle, hilt, whatever, towards the bottom, you want to be the darkest and fade into silhouette almost. As you would render this up, you would add subtle details, but it would be super low contrast in the handle there. So you can kind of see that's already reading a little bit. It's not perfect, but you're kind of getting the idea. So you can go ahead and add a little more highlight behind it and start working in. This thing's going to be a flaming sword. Again, these are just little small, simple examples. And a lot of this comes from my experience of painting hundreds and hundreds of these. So you can kind of see that it's starting to stick out. We're getting an idea. This isn't perfect. Doing a little bit of color dodging on it to really bring that out. Doing a little smudge to bring out some like flame shapes in the background. It's not reading super well, but you're kind of getting the idea. So I'd actually probably pop the background down a little more, but we're going to move on because these are going to just be quick little demos showing a couple different approaches. So for this one, I'm going to do what would be like a solid object, like some sort of magical cube here. So we're going to do a super white, hot background. That's going to be probably close to our brightest highlight. Then the face facing us is going to be our midtones, and a little bit of the midtone there on the bottom, but probably slightly darker. And then that shadow side is going to be almost as dark as the background. That might actually almost end up being the most saturated blacks. So we're bringing in just a little bit of detail here. But you can kind of already see, like this one's reading pretty well. Like we could, without even any color or any refinement, we kind of get an idea of what's going on. Adding a little bit of magical glowiness, some little sparkles. So you did a little zoom out check on that one. That's one of the things I always do when I'm creating my icons is I'm zooming in and out to see how they're going to look super, super tiny. Like I want to see them at even like 24 pixels or 12 pixels. So for this one this is gonna be one that we're gonna actually paint up here in the demo in a minute. But for this one, we're doing like some sort of spell effect, like some sort of arcane meteor or something coming in. So again, we got midtone in the background. We've got our super bright highlight at the very tip, at the point of it. Just showing how you can use a little bit of smudge effect here to create some like wispy, swirly tornado kind of effects around it. That gives it a little bit of volume instead of making it feel super flat. See, I'm working in a little more of that midtone into the background there. And that just kind of helps it all feel glowy and a lot of presence. It gives it a lot of depth. But that super bright highlight is the pointy bit. And you can see at a small scale, that one's reading super well as well. And go back and revisit the first one here just a little bit because I'm not super happy. Gonna add a little magic effect. So I don't really know what this one's meant to be, but sometimes I just can't help myself. I gotta add little magic flares. So I'm gonna tell you right now, the first thing that I want, one of the things that I use the most often in my toolkit is gonna be the smudge tool and the dodge tool. The dodge tool is really good for getting that super bright highlight. And then the smudge tool is a good way to get some really smooth transitions early and smudge in some of those like spell effects and stuff. And then I'll go in and kind of render them after I smudge. So with these two, I'm actually going ahead and I'm going to go ahead and draw them first. So I'm going to do a little bit of line work first. You'll see I also can't help myself and I start working in value pretty early. Early on when I was painting icons, I would kind of either draw first or do value first. The more and more icons that I painted, the more I kind of would take like a mixed approach. And I would start sketching like this. And then start adding values fairly early. See, like I'm just adding a little bit of highlight to the front. So this is some sort of, it's got these rings that move around, some sort of magical orb. And you can already see I'm working in some highlight here. Even though this is just a sketch. This is the kind of thing that I would take to get these perfect when I rendered them, the ellipses. I would actually use the selection tool one at a time and create them as different layers. But this is a good way to kind of block it all out and get a vision for what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start working a little mid-tone into the background here. I really want, so almost all icons are painted on a black background. And you're going to add a lot of mid-tone value and depth, and that's going to kind of gradient away to the corners. And maybe the corners of your icon should be almost all the way black, but really, if you're going to have any black, it should be in the shadows or in some core area. But I would almost always stay away from any black in my icons at all. And if you actually were to take the dropper tool and put it at any point over most of my icons, there's almost no place that's 100% black. All right, for this last one, we're going to do a little boot. I've painted tons and tons of boots. I don't even know how many. Often characters will have an ability that has some sort of swiftness, or they'll have a getaway or some sort of movement ability that is easily depicted with running or boots. Obviously, boots come as items in a lot of MOBAs. So I painted a lot of boot items and ability icons. So this one's probably more in the item zone because it's very much just a boot, and the boot is the center of it, not the action. I'm doing a little bit of leather, like flop over pirates, like a piratey boot, I think. So sketching this though and getting those forms of the feet and getting the anatomy correct and all that is super important. And so instead of using value on this one, I'm going to actually use this opportunity when I'm sketching it to get all the forms right off the bat. And then I'm going to loosely work in a little bit of value. You can see me adding some highlight. I'm going to add a little bit of highlight to the outside here. I think in the final icon on this one, I would have that dust glowy spell effect be kind of my brightest point, maybe matching a little bit of the reflection on the boot. It depends on the material that I would end up going with on this, but I'm imagining this being like a fairly normal brownish leather boot with some silver buckles. Probably imagining, like I start thinking about color early already now. I'm already thinking like, okay, maybe there's a blue effect. And we'll talk about that in a minute, the color choices that are dictated by conventions in your game. So you can see me just working in some mid-tone here, a little bit of extra highlight. It's probably a little too harsh. But again, this is just for me to get a really rough idea of what I'm going to do. And then a lot of these problems, a lot of the readability and issues that you're seeing in this icon right now, because it's not super readable, I'm going to solve that in the render. You can see me messing around and trying to solve some of the readability issues right now with the values. So yeah, going super dark down there on the bottom, really trying to use a little bit of line to clean out those forms. Yeah, so a little bit rough, but I've got a good enough idea that I could actually take this in, clean up my drawing, and start working in color on it. So real quick, I just want to pull up a couple of these and show you just some really simple examples of kind of what we've done here. So I'm just going to create a couple little black icons. And we're going to simplify with a little more solid color. Let me clone this thing. But just kind of show you these top couple and kind of what we've done. So you can see here, we're going to do highlight, a mid-tone that's towards the highlight. So this will be like our 75% white. Let me get this. Yep. And then we're going to have our black, and then we're going to have like our super hot highlight. So you're going to have like 75 to 50 in the background, solid black, which is 0, and then 100% white. So this is just going to be a quick, again, the sword, just showing you that gradient. And then I'm actually going to select this out and gradient it the opposite way. So you can kind of see these are the basic shapes that we're creating with the icons. So we're going to go here with our 50 to 75% white in the background, close to 100%. Then we're going to go with our almost 0 black. And then we're going to do kind of our 50% highlight on this one. And you can see I'm going all the way to 100% white there. So these two bottom schemes is 100% white to 0% black, or the 0% black to 100% white. These are two of my favorite schemes to use. They're just so bold and clear and obvious. You have to spend a lot of noodling when you do like the diagonal. Like when you do a weapon, you have to spend a lot of noodling to get that readability and to get that transition in the middle just right so that it doesn't feel too harsh. Okay, so we've created a couple little value sketches and line sketch icons. You can see those are reading pretty well already. They need a lot of love, but they're reading pretty well and they look pretty cool. So let's talk about, one of my favorite things to talk about is color conventions. So this isn't necessarily color in your icon, but color conventions that you might be bound to by the rules of kind of what players already know or the rules of your universe or game and what's set by your game. Now, I will say if you're starting a game from scratch, don't break these conventions. These are fairly standard across everything from like Diablo, World of Warcraft, League of Legends, Smite. I would say most games are going to use these conventions and players already kind of have like that in their brain. They already color associate with things. So, you're going to have a red, orange is going to be damage. Purple tends to be magic. And green is tending to be your healing or defense. Yellowish tones, yellow to orange is going to be like attack speed. Blue is going to be kind of your mana. That can kind of tie into purple often because of magic. And then like a lighter blue to white silver is going to be kind of your shields. Now this is just a general guideline, but players are going to associate this stuff with things that they've already seen in other games or in your game already. So you might have something that you need to design that you're going to get the stat sheet for from the designers. Like the designers might design a kit for a champion or an item, and they might say, like in this case, like I'm drawing this shield. They might say, hey, we need a shield, but the shield is going to heal you or it's going to be defense. So, you're going to be bound by what that item does and what its effect is on the player in game. The other thing I'm showing you here is some basic shapes that tend to be associated as well with these things. So damage is tending to be a hard, sharp shape. Magic is going to be a softer, rounder shape. Healing, defense, you're going to obviously have like a medical cross or a shield. Attack speed might be triangles or a pointy shape. Mana is going to tend to flow like fire or wisps. And shields are going to tend to show like a bubble around a thing. So again, just very basic. And these rules can be bent, but something to pay attention to. So also something to pay attention to with color conventions, and one that I really don't like when I see it broken, is rarity. So this is true across, I would say, almost all games. And when it's broken, it's super jarring and frustrating to me as a player and as a designer. So it's kind of set by, you know, what's in WoW is green is common, blue is rare, purple is epic, and orange is legendary. So I would stay to stick with those conventions as much as possible, or at least kind of have them in your head. Oftentimes you're going to have abilities that kind of flow together, so you're going to have to mix colors, but just something to think about. All right, something else to think about as you're designing this stuff is shapes of magic. This doesn't necessarily apply just to magic. It can apply to anything that you're doing on an icon. But when I say shapes of magic, I'm referring to what it's doing. Is it a healing magic? Is it a damaging magic? So if you're going to go with a damaging magic, you're going to want to do something like this, like, you know, something super sharp and aggressive and something that looks like it's going to punch through you. If you're doing like some sort of siphon effect, like you're sucking somebody's soul out, or you're sending out healing, it's going to do kind of this spiral look. Yeah, see, so super aggressive. So that's just something to think about. There's many shapes that you can add to your magic, but always kind of bear that in mind. Those are just like two little examples. Another thing to think about is where the player is and where the enemy is in relation to your icon. So a general rule of thumb is you always think of the player being left and the enemy being right, as we read left to right, and you kind of imagine that the player's there. So anything that would go from the player towards the enemy, any damaging effect that you might cast as the player, is going to go left to right. Zap. Yeah, there we go. Get that enemy. On the other side, anything that's coming from the enemy to the player is going to come from right to left. So if you're actually depicting like a shield ability that your player might have, you might, you know, throw up his shield here, draw a little stick figure of a dude holding up his shield. He's like, no, don't hurt me. Don't zap me. So he's holding up his shield here as the enemy's abilities are coming right to left. So that's also something to think about with your icons. That's a general rule of thumb. And actually with that icon just to the left of the little player stick figure, I'd probably turn around because it's probably going to be damaging. So you can kind of see here too with the running ability, it's running left to right because the player is like heading towards the enemy aggressively. But if it's like a boot that maybe allows you to retreat towards the fountain faster or something like that, then you might want to have it facing the other direction to show that the player is in retreat. So yeah, you can see like some sort of movement ability icon is going to head into combat faster. He's going to head left to right. So if any healing effects are coming from other players or you absorb health, then again, you're going to want that. See, you're going to want this dude. He's like happy. He's like, yeah, I'm getting heals. Mad heals, bro. It's coming right to left because it's still coming towards your player. Just a couple things to think about. All these things can help tell the story and help sell the effect of what you're doing in the game. And icons are all about readability and they're all about the gameplay. The cool thing about doing these icons is that they're a thing that gets the audience actually sees versus most concept art. So doing a soul siphon here, same thing. It's like, yeah, he's sucking out your soul, dude. So again, player on the left, sucking out the soul, the enemy on the right. So the cool thing about these, like I was saying, is that, you know, these are a thing that the public actually gets to see as a 2D artist. It's kind of a rare thing, and so that makes them super fun. But the thing about that is they are a piece of the gameplay. These aren't just a place to come and do the best piece of art that you can or do whatever you want. There's a lot of rules and guidelines that dictate how you paint your icons. So another example is putting together a whole kit. Now I'm not going to put together an entire kit of ability icons in this demo because that would just take too long. It takes quite a while to design a kit and to refine a kit of icons to a professional AAA standard like for League of Legends. But I will show you an example here of kind of how you can think about putting together a full kit. So in general, let's just use QWER as the MOBA standard. So your Q ability is generally it's a little bit better than your basic attack, like whatever your auto fire attack is. So it's something that's going to be facing left to right, going towards the enemy. It's going to be fairly simple though. So there might be a little more negative space in that first one just to show that it's not like the most powerful thing. Your W ability is typically a utility ability. So this might be sort of like a bomb. I play Ziggs in League of Legends. So Ziggs thing is his little satchel that you can bounce him around or bounce enemies back. So that's kind of your utility. Right? Utility usually has something to do with movement or some sort of combo thing or something that's going to work with other players. Your W in general is your hardest one to get a combo with. Your E is going to be slightly more powerful, but again, it might be some sort of utility thing. It might be a little more of a flash ability that you can use more regularly. So in this case, I'm just putting together a basic kit. Again, maybe this is like, you know, you have your basic attack that's like a little more of a zap that's on a slight cooldown. You have some sort of maybe bomb thing. And then you've got some sort of jump leap ability to get you into combat. And then whatever your ultimate is, I don't know what this ultimate is, but your ultimate is going to look awesome. So maybe this is some sort of big nuke effect that comes down and brings down hell and destruction on your enemies. So this one, your ultimate, you really want to sell. You want to sell this one as the most powerful. So this one should be the most full of the icons. It should be super bright, super fun, and have almost zero black in it. Again, really depending. This is just a basic rule of thumb. But you can kind of see in this kit how they kind of build in intensity. And so with those first three, you don't necessarily think that any of them are better than the other. But the R, you're definitely like, okay, that's way better. See, so I'm doing a little color dodging, really brightening that thing up. You want that one to pop. When that thing comes off a cooldown, maybe it's a 45 or 50 second cooldown, and the player sees it not be, you know, grayed out, and sees that thing pop into full color, they should be super excited to push that button again. And in an esports setting, then the whole audience should know, you know, everyone watching on Twitch or everyone in the arena should know that that thing is ready. Like it should pop up and be obvious. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to do a quick color pass as well, just to show you some color considerations. So we're going to go with kind of a blue theme on this one. But you don't want all of your icons to be the same color. You don't want them to be monotone. Or monochromatic, I should say. So we're adding a little bit of yellow to this utility to show it a little, you know, give it a little differentiation. And then we're going to go with a lot of yellow and gold on this ultimate so it really kind of stands out. So you can kind of see these. This is like really fast. Like this is actually, I'm doing this in real time. So a real kit is going to take, you know, can take 3 to 7 days to actually get perfectly dialed in. But it's a good little example of what a kit should look like and how it should build in intensity. So there you go, QWER. Yeah, sell that R. Yeah, when the player gets the R, they should be stoked. This should literally, you know, elicit joy in the player every time they get to use this ability. So make sure that the icon matches that. Like, you're telling a story to the player with these, and they are part of the gameplay, and they are part of the feedback loop, right? So your combo might go something like this, or, you know, you might be able to combo things a lot differently. So understanding the gameplay and understanding how the game works is critically important as well. So I'm just showing, you know, hey, your abilities might tie in. They might tie into the abilities of other heroes or champions as well. So the more you can understand about that, and the more you can understand about the gameplay, like I said, these really are a gameplay piece of the game. It's a cool place to show off some really cool art and to really create like tiny, tiny illustrations. But at the end of the day, if this is not, you know, centered around gameplay, then it's not done right. So remember, gameplay is king. Ship it. Okay, so there we go. So we just did a quick little overview of like some things to think about when creating icons. I'm going to try to cover a little more as we get into the demos here, but this is just a basic set of things to start thinking about. So let's jump in and do a demo. I'm going to demonstrate here on this one, in this first part of creating icons, I'm going to do a spell effect. So we're going to use the kind of like arcane missile meteor, whatever you want to call it, from my thumbnail. So the first thing I do is I kind of work in a little bit of midtones before I start sketching. I don't like sketching just on a flat black background. I like to kind of start sketching in color a little bit. So we've already kind of, in that thumbnail that I, you know, showed in the first part of this video, we already kind of worked out the value scale. So, you know, just start sketching in some shapes. This is where I really, this part is very much sketching. It's very exploratory. I'm not married to any idea yet. Kind of going to figure out what I'm doing. First here, I kind of thought of this being maybe like a solid rock shape. Yeah, so you can see I'm kind of just, I think I might even have my brush set on color dodge here. Maybe it's set on normal, but it's, yeah, you can see it's a very bright purple. So as I use the pressure, it kind of gets brighter and brighter. So I'm just on one layer here. Really, I'm just trying to capture the flow and the action. Work out the angles here. It's still facing the wrong direction, by the way, for everything that I said in the first part, but we're going to fix that later, trust me. So actually, because I'm right-handed in the way that I draw, I tend to like to create my icons. If there's an action going a certain direction, see, I have to draw overhand like a lefty to get that angle going up from the bottom right to the top left if it's angled this way. So I tend to like to create it the other way, create those action lines at the natural way that my hand creates that whooshing line. All right, so now I put it on color dodge here. Another one that I use is screen, because screen might not get so aggressive. So when you're using purples, the color dodge tends to go to pink. But if you're using screen, it can stay a little more in those whites. So again, very loose here, very, very rough, very stringy, I guess. Yeah, so I'm going to drop the opacity down here, kind of have an idea of where I'm going. I'm erasing out everything off the background. And now I'm going to really, so creating a new layer here, and I'm going to really start refining some shapes. But the first thing I'm going to do is get those midtones into the background. Like I said, you're not going to get an accurate read of the foreground highlights. They're going to look too bright, and it's going to look too harsh if you don't have a little bit of midtone in the background. So I'm going to have multiple of these missiles, like it's like a meteor shower, some sort of magical arcane shower. So we're going to have a couple. One thing to think about when you're doing that is to make sure that you don't have, if you're going to have multiple elements coming in, make sure they're all staggered in size. You don't want to have like necessarily 3 even sizes. Okay, now I'm going to create the actual form here. I'm going to outline it. sometimes when I'm working for a client on something like this, I can go through this phase maybe, sometimes 10 times, certainly more than once. You can definitely go through this phase a couple times where I'm like lining it out and I get new ideas. So sometimes it takes that noodling. I kind of think of myself more of a sculptor often when I'm doing it this way. When I'm painting in general, I think of myself more as a sculptor. Digitally allows you to kind of do that and go through and kind of rework and erase and redraw, adding and subtracting. So right now I'm just trying to get that center shape. So it's going to look super ugly. It's going to be way too high contrast. It's going to be way too flat. But we're going to get there. All right, one thing I would suggest that you do with this course and with the next one is maybe think about drawing along. Maybe try this yourself. Try to create something similar yourself, or copy this one is fine. It's a good way to practice. And you can kind of get a feel for how brushes behave and, how the colors behave. So the dimensions of this, I think, are 512 by 512, which is a little large. Often I will do these just at 256. So I want to have a good ratio of shapes here. And this is just me playing around trying to find that good ratio of shapes. And at this first phase now, the first phase here of the rendering is just creating really flat, solid, clean. So when you're erasing out, I'm creating really harsh edges. Trying to get the flow of everything. Yeah, this is like some sort of dark magic, I think, because it's, we've got purple going on, but we're getting into we're going to go with the dark, grimmer purples rather than a brighter, pinkish, happier purple. I'm definitely like seeing Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty in my head right now. So right now I'm using a round brush. This is just all done with a round brush. With size and opacity and flow set to pen pressure. But my opacity and my flow are set to 100%. So now that I've got that shape, I locked it. I locked the pixels on that layer, and I'm going in with the color dodge. Like you can see, it's like an airbrush, and just kind of airbrushing in some of that and starting to get some of that highlight in. So this is actually still that airbrush right now, but just much smaller. Trying to work in some of that highlight first. So already you can kind of see where we're going. We're playing with the shapes. We're exaggerating things really hard outlines. Like there's almost like a pinstripe, like hot rod flame effect going on here. Yeah, so I'm not loving like some of the shapes. Like I feel like a little bit of it's like too balanced out. So I'm just gonna keep working on this for a minute and we'll fix that in a minute. Because I'm basically committed with my colors and using color dodge to keep pushing through with this. Another thing that's going to happen as I start working in colors, you're going to start getting some ugly, muddy colors and some midtones in there. But I'll show you how we're going to fix that in a bit. So I dropped a new layer behind this layer, and I'm working some of those like glowy bits. So super, super soft airbrush. Going in with a little dark purple again, still on color dodge, and start popping in some of those highlights just to get some of that glow effect. It's like it's ambient. Yeah, so now we can already see there's a little bit of volume starting to come in. So right here I'm using the smudge tool. I'm using it pretty high. I think it's set at about 70%. And it's just a hard round. You can see the brush there on the right. It's a hard round with size set to pressure. You get some really nice streaky effects. If you go all the way to 100%, it streaks too much. And if you're too low, then it doesn't streak enough. So I find that somewhere between that like 70 to 90% is kind of the sweet spot. So yeah, starting to smudge in a lot of that magic effect. This is cool because I can pull some of that negative shape. I'm not pulling any of the black. I'm actually just pulling, no pixels through the pixels. And so it's creating a bit of that negative shape and selling a lot of the motion. Pop a little more color back in here. So this is another layer. I'm going to pop some pink in here. Now you can kind of see how now some of our foreground flame bit is actually darker than our glowy bit behind. But like I said, we're going to fix that here in a minute. So trying to echo some of those shapes that I have going on. Already, this is kind of creating like a third layer. So I'm also feeling that it's looking a little bit flat still overall. So let me work on this for a minute and then we'll see if we can address that as well. See, so I'm addressing some of the shapes here. Want a little more to the nose. This is something too that's always good to get other eyes on when you're working. So get with your art director or other artists. Ask non-game people how they feel about it. Especially people that play the game, like, at work or, that you're not breaking NDA for. I find that having non-artists look at this stuff is really helpful because it's non-artists that are going to be playing the game. And so while as the artist, yes, it's your job to be right. It's super helpful to get a non-artist perspective because they're not going to look at it with that like artist criticality. They're going to look at it as a gamer and kind of their understanding of it. That is not what I meant to do. All right, so I'm going to work in some really dark purples. So this is kind of what I was going back to saying earlier. Like I have almost no black. See, like I'm getting all the way down there, almost no black. Now on the screen recording, and depending on your monitor, it might look a little black, but if you were to actually open the PSD here and even get, maybe in the very, very corners, you're going to have like some true black. But I'm willing to bet that 98% of this image has some purple in it. Exaggerating out some shapes. One of the things that's really, really important and will really sell the detail in your icons is what I call the one pixel effects. So using a brush that's super small, maybe not necessarily 1 pixel, but you can see getting these like super stringy lines that are super tiny can really sell some of the effects. And once this icon's down at game scale, it'll really help it have a little bit of that sharpness. Yeah, see, I'm not happy with some of these shapes. It's too balanced. Let's get a little more spear shape in here. So at this point, I'm actually just selecting the color. I'm not worried about the gradient. I'm just selecting the color that was already put down by the gradient, and I'm just painting, which you'll see it's going to leave a little bit of a muddy effect. It's not going to be super clean right now. But we're going to clean it all up. There's like some final polish magic that we can do. So while I'm looking at this and while I'm working on this, I tend to just keep working on what I'm working on, like not lose focus. But I'm already thinking about changes that I can do. Like I said, there's not a lot of volume. The color tone isn't exactly right. I was just thinking about this. The tail maybe isn't super wide enough. I started addressing some of those things and just kind of noodling around. I don't want to mess up everything. I have done hard resets on icons. So here we go. So I'm adding overlay. So I added a new layer. I clipped it to that layer on top, and I'm doing some color effects. See, this is just a color layer. It's going to unify all that color. It's what I was saying. It's going to pull out a lot of that muddiness. So it's a good trick to do. So when you're painting, you're gonna find that as you're using the color dodge or screen brush, and as you're using different tones, you're gonna start having quite a variety of color, and it's gonna start looking pretty ugly. So we're gonna go through and clean a lot of that up with color layers. We'll unify everything, and then I'll often drop that down. And on this one here, I'm doing an overlay layer. It's just bringing some of that pop in. One of the things you can do actually with overlay is actually use a super dark purple in this case, or a dark, a super dark version of whatever color you're painting in, and it'll create some really nice highlights. It'll push some of that mid-tone back, and it'll kind of brighten up. So I'm in pretty dark tone here. So another thing is I want gradient going from the corners. I don't want the highlight going all the way from the tip to the corners. So I have just a normal layer clipped to that main missile layer. You see that? I made the whole thing purple, and then I'm actually going to erase it out. So I'm going to play around with it a little bit until I get it just right. See, so now I'm going up in the pink a little bit, just so that it's not so punchy. It's going to really bring the focus to that tip. We want that to be the focal point of the whole thing. Working some background magic again. So you can see how dark my color selection is at this point. All right, now we're going to fix some volume. So I'm going to go through on a new layer, and I'm going to create some of those I call them tornado effects. The a little spirally bit. Yeah, I'm just trying it out, see if it works, see if we like it. It's adding a little bit of volume right now. It's also adding a little bit of complexity, so let me just play with it here, see, and then coming in here and adding some of that twist to these other ones, adding a little bit of detail to the side ones. There we go. I'll just pull this around. It's all about playing up in the last 10% of these icons. Again, in the real world, working for a client, working on an actual icon for a game, it can be certainly the most amount of work can be that getting that last 10% dialed in. So I'm going to come in here. Now I'm going to start playing with some effects. I'm going to start erasing some of this out to create a little separation between those, a little more contrast. Kind of thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm going to do something cool here. To unify everything. I'm just gonna add a little more highlight punches here, a little more little shards falling off of the meteor. Now you have to be careful. You don't want to go too small with these. I'm usually not afraid because you have to realize that this is going to show up in game maybe at 128, maybe, but probably at 64 pixels wide. So 64 by 64, that's super small. So you're going to actually lose a lot of these details. So I'm actually going through the white punch was too much. All right, let's do this. This is my favorite thing to do. So I'm going to go through here. And what I'm going to do is do a color layer. I'm actually going to select something completely different. And I'm going to drop the opacity and start erasing some out. But you'll see it actually starts creating this unifying effect over the whole image. And I'm just going to play with it until it looks like, right? I want this to be purple and blues. But by adding that teal and blue overlay, or color layer, can really nuke some colors down and come up with some of those really good mid-tone colors that you maybe broke while you were using color dodge or screen. Yeah, all right. Yeah, this is looking pretty good here. So I'm gonna just, So added this to overlay completely black. This is going to darken everything. You can see what it's doing by doing almost black over it. And then erase it out. It's going to punch back some of those things in the upper corners and really create a lot more depth here. So this is really just final effects. I really like doing this overlay though. Those two things, doing a color layer, doing an overlay layer, and playing around with them at the end, just to really get that highlight really right. All right, let's bring this out. Yeah, all right, this is looking pretty good. Bring it down to size. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Has a lot of motion, a lot of energy. I'm pretty happy with this icon. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's definitely shippable. So that concludes the first part of this painting icons class. In the second part, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive and build on some of these techniques, and we're going to create an item icon, which will have an actual object in it as well as spell effects. So it's a little more complex to balance those things out. So we'll dive into that, as well as taking a deeper look at other considerations such as gameplay, putting a kit together for a champion, esports, etc. We'll look at some specific examples of icons that I've created for clients. So we'll look at actual icons from games such as League of Legends and Smite. And we will kind of do a little bit of an analysis on them. And I'll explain a couple things that I'm thinking about and a couple things to keep in mind as you're painting icons. So if you want to paint some icons, you definitely don't want to miss that one. So thanks for watching this course. We covered a decent amount here. We covered some thumbnailing, some value considerations. We covered some color conventions, some considerations for some of the design language that we would use, such as direction of attacks and where the player is, and how to communicate that vital information to the player. Just remember, when you're painting icons, all of these do center around gameplay. I keep saying that, but it's very, very important. These are part of the game, and they're part of the gameplay. So they're telling a story, they're giving information to the player, they're a HUD element, they're part of the UI, and they impact the player's user experience as well. So always keep that in mind. The player should be first, the gameplay should be first, making a gorgeous piece of art should be a given, but that's not the primary purpose. There's a lot of other functions to these beyond just making something that looks pretty. So I suggest you go out and start practicing some icons, paint a couple, try some techniques. My brush recommendations, finally, are use a very wide airbrush to get some of those tones and gradients in there, some of the softer effects, and then use just a hard round with tapering on it, set to pressure sensitivity, with opacity set to pressure sensitivity, and vary your sizes. I would don't be afraid to go super small, like 5 to 1 pixel even, to get some of those really tiny crisp lines in there. So we'll take a little more of a look at all that in the next course. But for now, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.